it's a great topic because I actually don't correlate it as much to 2017, because to me, when they put the stress test in and everything in 2017, I mean, that was put in to cool the real estate market specifically. Okay. Now we have to look at why interest rates are rising right now. Interest rates rising right now, they're not rising because of the real estate market. The real estate market is just a casualty of this, right? Interest rates are rising because of inflation. And inflation's at a point now, it's still well over 7%.
Over 7,
we haven't been here since the 90s.
Wow.
And in the 90s, when it was 7% inflation, interest rates were over 10%, 12%.
So you remember this, right?
So I remember this. I'm not quite that old, but I was looking for my first home, kind of in that territory, and interest rates spike. So for me, I'm seeing it more through that lens. I'm seeing it more through the inflation lens than I am specifically through the real estate lens. Anyone who's got a stock portfolio, you're experiencing the same thing with your stock portfolio as we're experiencing here in the real estate market now, right? So what my personal outlook is, I'm looking at this and saying, well, one, this is largely driven by actually the war in Ukraine, right? Because that's what's affected the price of fossil fuels and everything else. And you're seeing inflation rates, look, they're not a Canadian thing right now, right? They're a global thing. So they're grappling with this in the US, they're grappling with this in Europe and whatnot. And the only way that you can really effectively combat inflation and get inflation under control is really by throwing a handbrake on and spiking interest rates hard. Hard. And
you brought up a good point yesterday, like we were talking about it. You talk about like the rates going up. Is this actually going to bring prices down? And then you had a thought process that, because I have no background in that sort of like economic study, but you brought something to light that I thought actually makes a lot of sense, like you were talking about.
Yeah, it's kind of supply and demand, right? So there was a point that was made. So you get generally it's the price of fossil fuels that drives everything, right? Because you use petroleum and fossil fuels to produce plastics, you name it, right? It trickles down through the whole economy. It brings prices up. Now, a colleague of ours said, okay, so now, for example, the price of a pizza has gone up in a pizzeria, right? As the price of fossil fuels comes down, maybe the price of some of those raw materials comes down. Is there really any incentive now for vendors to reduce their own prices, right? So as consumers, we're going to get hit for a while.
Yeah, you're thinking our price, like who's going to lower their price now that it's been set to that price for a pizza?
You're trying to get it back. If anything, you're trying to crawl it back, right? So, but really, and to a large extent, you're right. Like a lot of vendors aren't necessarily just going to reduce the price. But what that does is if they don't reduce the price and the price of your raw materials has come down, well, now there's more margin in that business, right? So yeah, you're getting more profit out of that business, but now there's more margin, there's more room for competition to enter in. Yeah. So you'll start to see some undercutting, and then things will normalize. But that comes with a lag, right? So interest rates can come down, or the price of fuel and whatnot or the price of fuel can come down, and prices may lower. But as consumers, we're still going to get hit for another year and a half, kind of after that, until competition can actually normalize that back.
What's your prediction with interest rates until we see a stabilization, or not even a decrease, just a stop in the hikes? Do you have any idea, sort of, what do you think with that?
I think, look, there's a lot of pressures here right now because, one, inflation's out of control. They got to hit that handbrake. At the same time, we're a debt-reliant society in the West, right? So, we can't necessarily afford high interest rates for a long period of time. My sense is they're going to continue to hit interest rates hard, probably for the remainder of 2022. I think as soon as you see inflation start to level off and starts to dip, then you're going to see a fairly rapid decrease again in interest rates, just to generate some relief and stimulate spending. Because the real risk here is we're going to end up in a recession, right? Which I think we probably will end up. But I think it's almost unavoidable that we're gonna land in a recession. But my guess is, again, I think we're going to continue with interest rate rises through the remainder of 2022, 2023. I think we start to see them come down a little.
And that's the thing. Like, we're all talking, we think 2023 will be the stop. But like, is it going to be the start? Is it going to be the fall? Who knows how long we're going to see till it actually starts to come back down? Because I mean, it will come back down, right?
It'll come back down. But what we got from a real estate perspective, though, is right. Real estate's a leading indicator. So right now, right, one of the the reason why you're seeing prices fall as interest rates go up, although inflation is still high, inflation still rises because it's a leading indicator. So the fact that real estate prices are falling fairly sharply tells you that the interest rate raises are working, right? So it's a leading indicator. At the same time, real estate prices will also be a leading indicator on the other end. So as the economy starts to bounce back and inflation a little bit out of control, I think you'll see a pretty sharp bump again on real estate prices, because we haven't even talked about inventory.
No.
So like there's a hard floor here, right? It's not a you know, I don't know where rock bottom is right now price wise. What I do know is, regardless of what's happening with interest rates, there's still a housing shortage in the market, right? So there's still people looking for places to live. It's not like there's an abundance of supply, right? There's still a supply demand issue.
But so you know what though, in terms of new listings though, if you look at it from the stats that came out last month, we are still pretty high for the last 2 years compared to the last 2 years, right? But still like at an all-time low. Like it's still super low, right? The amount of listings that are on the market. And I don't know, I think just even, like, sometimes I don't even know if it's actually the interest rate themselves that are dropping the price, or it's the talk about the interest rate. Like people talk about the rates are going up, I'm gonna wait, I'm gonna sit back. And I think that's where we're losing our 1 out of every 5 buyers is people kind of taking a back seat.
It's also a little bit of, it's
maybe it goes lower and then I can get a deal.
And right? It's also a little bit of, it's a confluence of events too, because we were in a little bit of a, I hate to call it a real estate bubble because demand's so high for housing. So I don't think it was necessarily a bubble, but anytime you've got 30, 40% increases, you know, like we saw in 2021 and 2022, well, that was bound to give some back. So I think even independent of interest rates, I think that was, you're starting to see a lot of fatigue on the side of buyers. For sure. So I think it was going to give some of that back anyway in the back half of 2022. Now add in interest rates and inflation and kind of everything else. Well, okay, so now we've got the situation that we're in.
And there's a different type of buyer emerging now. Like one thing that I'm seeing a lot of my buyers that have jumped back in were people that didn't want to compete, just refused. You know, you get those people that think like, I don't want to go into competition. I don't want to go against 10 offers, 15 offers. I'm actually starting to find clients now, I'm getting calls to go show properties to people that are saying, yeah, I like this because now I can buy a house on financing, on 100%. Home inspection.
Yeah, and I've got first-time buyers that were locked out in January and February and December. They just threw their hands in the air and you know, they couldn't get into the Hamilton market at all. Now all of a sudden they're all getting in. Right? So there's positives and negatives here. For most, you know, for some people it's a negative, but for some people like first-time buyers that have been frozen out of the market, it's actually a positive. Prices are down. Like you can get into Hamilton now. You can get in for well under $500,000. You can get into the market, right? And if you look at, it wasn't anywhere near that in February.
Yeah, and you look at some of the cities that have been hit the hardest, and it's really like Hamilton's, I don't know what we call them, ancillary cities like Beamsville, Grimsby, Binbrook. Binbrook is taking a pretty hard hit right now. Super high levels of inventory there. They were at what, 4 months of inventory?
4 months of inventory.
That's crazy. That's nuts. We haven't seen 4 months of inventory since, I think 2017 was the last time it crept kind of around that mark, but that's just for Binbrook. So I think because a lot of people went out there because it was affordable, but now that jobs are moving back to the GTA, people can buy in Hamilton.
Well, and you know, and I don't have the numbers in front of me for the GTA, but it was an interesting. Someone mentioned an interesting stat is that actually the prices in downtown Toronto haven't dropped as significantly as the surrounding areas, and you know, I guess the question is why, but I think it's pretty clear to me at least. I think during COVID, everyone was moving out of the GTA, and that was kind of fueling your price growth in areas outside that. Now as people go back, so they already basically had their value decrease kind of built in. It didn't increase in downtown Toronto the same way it increased on the outskirts, certainly in Hamilton and Burlington. So that was kind of all priced in already. So I think you're seeing people go back downtown as they're getting back to work and whatnot, and it's kind of mitigating this decrease there.
What do you guys foresee with interest rates? Tell us what you think. We'd love to hear about it. Drop us a comment, ask us a question. I mean, we're always here to answer.
If you're an investor, and if you're an investor, I want to hear from you. If you're an investor, are you getting in right now? Are you waiting? Kind of what's your thoughts on the market here?